Just like we see with every single Marvel movie released, the big lead up, the excitement, the hype that the mainstream media desperately tries to generate. Then the early access screenings come out and they tell you it's the best thing ever. Then the reviews come out. Then the opening weekend happens. And even when the opening weekend is weak, like it was with Fantastic Four First Steps.
There have been a lot of those out there, like Bob Iger, the Disney CEO, Kevin Feige, and even Pedro Pascal, that made things way worse than they needed to be when it came to the press tour and when it came to damage control over the financial status of the Fantastic Four, how it's performing at the box office, right? We know that Pedro got very political. We know that Disney CEO Bob Iger is starting to get very political about this movie. Even Kevin Feige doubled down about the future of the MCU and how it's going to embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how that's just not going away.
I tell you, oh my gosh, everybody, Marvel's back, watch out. And it always ends up happening this way, where the second weekend falls off a cliff, and that is what we saw for Fantastic Four. But would it rebound in its third weekend? Well, of course it did.
Marvel isn't just having a bad year. It's facing a collapse that even Disney can't spin away. For years, this was the studio that could do no wrong. Every release felt like an event. Every project built momentum, and fans lined up without hesitation. But now, Marvel is no longer the cultural powerhouse it once was. The cracks are everywhere. Box office failures, abandoned streaming shows, and even open frustration from fans who once defended the brand at all costs. What's worse is the way Disney has responded. Instead of asking the hard questions about storytelling, direction, and respect for audiences, they've decided the real problem is the audience itself. Yes, you heard that right.
Brand Marvel used to sell tickets in and of itself. It almost didn't matter what the movie was. People were interested because they were so bought into the MCU. And in particular, late into phase 3, it was just people trusted they were going to get a good movie. Or
Disney's top brass has actually gone on record blaming politics, pointing fingers at groups like Trump supporters for why fans are no longer showing up. Think about how absurd that is. A multi-billion-dollar company with the most iconic superheroes in the world wants you to believe the reason their movies are flopping isn't bad writing, weak characters, or creative burnout. It's politics. But the truth is far simpler and a lot more uncomfortable for Disney. This collapse didn't come out of nowhere, and it didn't happen overnight. It's been building for years, and one film in particular shows us exactly how deep the problems go. The Fantastic Four was supposed to be Marvel's big comeback, their shiny reset button. Disney threw everything they had at it. Kevin Feige hyped it up. Pedro Pascal was brought in as the face of Marvel's rebirth.
And now it's looking like Fantastic Four is gonna bomb. I think Pedro Pascal fatigue is real. I think people are tired of this guy. He's in everything. He's constantly in all these magazines and websites are trying to say this is the sexiest man alive.
Metrics now sitting at around $460-some million worldwide. Those are indeed the global box office numbers by Disney and Marvel Studios, and exactly why it's throwing them into a state of panic and really acting very frantic about the future of the MCU. Well, 2.5 months ago, give or take, they had way higher projections for the box office performance in theaters for the Fantastic Four, and that's exactly why, where it sits right now, it is really not looking good based on how much they poured into the budget of this thing, based on the expense of the marketing campaign, the press tour, etc.
And the marketing campaign was everywhere. Billboards plastered across major cities, trailer drops that felt like global events, endless interviews promising a return to Marvel's golden age. This was not just another superhero film. Disney positioned it as the film, the one that would silence the critics, rebuild fan trust, and prove that Marvel could still dominate the box office. They weren't shy about expectations either. $650 million to $700 million. Worldwide was the target. They wanted to remind audiences that Marvel was untouchable. But then reality hit, and it hit hard.
Doing fantastic at the box office. Its opening weekend was good enough. It well outperformed Thunderbolts and Captain America Brave New World from earlier this year, but its second weekend saw a 66% drop off, which is a bad number.
The opening weekend was softer than expected. The second week drop-offs were brutal, and by the end, Fantastic Four limped to just $446 million worldwide. Let that sink in. Under Disney's Marvel brand, with one of the most famous superhero teams ever created, and with one of Hollywood's most bankable marketing machines behind it, the movie couldn't even scrape past $500 million. That's not just disappointing, that's catastrophic. And instead of treating this as a wake-up call, Disney doubled down. Instead of asking why audiences didn't connect, they reached for excuses. And the excuse they landed on? Blame the fans themselves. So what happens when one of the most hyped films in your lineup faceplants at the box office?
We were told by Marvel repeatedly that Fantastic Four was a new start and a really important moment for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Not only was this movie going to blow your mind, but it was also going to lead into Avengers Doomsday, this massive team up that Marvel is spending so much money putting together that needs to be big for them. As a result, this movie, Fantastic Four, the lead-in needed to be big for them. Unfortunately, that was not the case after a rather pedestrian and weak opening weekend.
If you're Disney, you don't admit mistakes. You don't look at bloated budgets, confused scripts, or uninspired casting choices. No, you point fingers. Bob Iger, the CEO steering Disney through this storm, didn't say, "We need better stories," or "We lost touch with our fans." Instead, he blamed politics. Reports claim he suggested that so-called MAGA Republicans were sabotaging Disney projects by refusing to show up, and Pedro Pascal, rather than acknowledging criticism of his take on Mr. Fantastic, brushed it off as political bias.
A box office collapse in its second weekend, and the past couple weekends have not really helped this movie too much either. As you can see, it's sitting at just under $470 million worldwide. We can look here. We see a 44% drop, not quite as bad as the last couple weeks, following two consecutive 60% drops for them. But it is now starting to lose steam, both domestically and internationally. And the estimates for the global run when it's all said and done.
As if thousands of lifelong Marvel fans suddenly stopped caring about superheroes because of their voting habits. The truth is far less complicated. People didn't like the movie. Fans don't care about political games. They care about whether the film respects their time and delivers on its promise. Fantastic Four didn't. And when you zoom out, you see this isn't an isolated incident. It's part of a much bigger pattern across Disney's entire lineup. Look at Disney's slate in 2025, and you'll see a graveyard of failed projects. Snow White was marketed as a bold reimagining, but ended up remembered. More for Rachel Zegler's interviews than for anything in the actual movie. Captain America Brave New World couldn't escape behind-the-scenes drama, endless reshoots, and controversy from its own lead actor. Thunderbolts barely made a ripple. It wasn't hated, but it wasn't loved either. Mediocrity doesn't sell tickets. Pixar's Elio, it didn't even get off the ground. One after another, these projects arrived with heavy marketing, corporate hype, and big promises, only to collapse under the weight of expectations. And here's the key. Audiences aren't just skipping one film anymore. They're walking away from the brand entirely. They're not saying, "Oh, I'll just miss this one." They're saying, "I'm done with Disney." That shift is devastating, because once people decide they can't trust your brand, it doesn't matter how much money you throw at the next release. The trust is broken, and trust is everything. And if you think the box office looks bad, wait until you see what's happening on Disney Plus. Disney Plus was once touted as the future of entertainment, the crown jewel that would carry the company into a new era. But instead of being a consistent hit machine, it's become a money pit. Shows like Secret Invasion, She-Hulk, and Echo launched with massive budgets and heavy promotion, only to vanish without impact. Viewership numbers were underwhelming, critics didn't rally behind them, and fans simply didn't care. The projects felt rushed, soulless, or worse, like corporate experiments that no one asked for. Billions of dollars were spent on content that didn't spark conversation or create lasting memories. Even die-hard Marvel fans, the people who once consumed every single project, started saying enough is enough. And this wasn't just about superhero fatigue. It was about quality, about respect for the audience's time. People don't want to watch lectures wrapped in CGI costumes. They want stories worth investing in. And if Marvel is struggling this badly, imagine what's happening to Star Wars. There was a time when Star Wars was untouchable. The Force Awakens earned over $2 billion and reignited a global phenomenon. Fast forward to today, and Disney has managed to turn one of the most beloved franchises in history into a streaming punchline. The Acolyte fizzled out. Skeleton Crew didn't even get off the runway. Audiences don't feel excitement for Star Wars anymore. They feel indifference. That's how badly Disney has damaged the brand. And Pixar? Once the gold standard of animation, the studio behind classics like Toy Story and Finding Nemo, now reduced to box office flops like Lightyear, Elemental, and Elio. Parents no longer see Pixar as a safe bet for family magic. The trust is gone. Across every corner of Disney's empire, the same story repeats. Declining trust, declining audiences, declining revenue. And yet, instead of recognizing the creative bankruptcy at the heart of this collapse, Bob Iger is rewriting the narrative. Here's the brutal truth. Marvel no longer knows how to build excitement. Remember how it used to work? Iron Man led to Avengers. Avengers set the stage for Civil War, and Civil War was a stepping stone to Infinity War and Endgame. Each movie wasn't just a story. It was a promise of something bigger. That promise is gone. Now, every release feels like an isolated flop, another reminder that the magic is over. Captain America: Brave New World tanked, Thunderbolts fizzled, and Fantastic Four crashed hard. And yet, Disney keeps bragging about Avengers: Doomsday as if it's going to save everything. They talk about how diverse the cast is, how it will represent everyone. That's fine. But diversity isn't what sold tickets for Infinity War. People showed up because they loved the characters and trusted the storytellers. That trust doesn't exist anymore. And while Marvel is bleeding out, DC, the company that once tripped over its own shoelaces, is finally generating curiosity. James Gunn's Superman might be controversial, but at least people are talking about it. At least there's energy. Meanwhile, Marvel feels exhausted, and that exhaustion goes all the way to the top. So where does this leave Marvel, Disney, and the fans who used to keep them afloat? The answer is harsh but simple. The billion-dollar Marvel era is finished. Not because of fans, not because of politics, but because Disney lost sight of what made its movies special in the first place. They stopped making films with passion and started making them with checklists. They swapped heart for agendas, storytelling for boardroom strategies, and assumed audiences would never walk away. But audiences did walk away, and they're still leaving. Every flop is a reminder that the magic is gone. Every empty theater is proof that Disney's strategy is failing. The Fantastic Four was supposed to be Marvel's great revival. Instead, it exposed their biggest flaw. The problem isn't the fans, and it isn't politics. The problem is Disney. Until they remember that people want to be entertained, inspired, and respected, not preached at, every so-called comeback will look just like Fantastic Four: overhyped, underwhelming, and forgotten.